On Sunday night at 10 o'clock, the weekend was rattled by the news of Juan Soto being signed by the New York Metropolitans, um, ripping away what could have been a franchise player for the Yankees away from the New York Yankees, and Steve Cohen really flexing that financial might that he has been, let's face it, just talking about for years. So it was a little bit of a shock, but not that surprising in retrospect. And what's been more surprising is really the reaction to this whole situation. To which I say, Yankee fans, how are we doing? It has been 4 days. It has been really enlightening, I guess is the word, to see the reaction online to Soto going from franchise hero that sends you to the World Series in Cleveland with a clutch home run, clutch insurance home run, to essentially the villain. When Soto comes back to Yankee Stadium, that is going to be must-see TV. I mean, if they haven't already locked down the ESPN rights for that game, and what the reaction is going to be from the fan base should be interesting. Now, as a Yankee fan, and this is full disclosure, I can't sit here and lie to you and say that I wasn't disappointed by the news, because Juan Soto is a great hitter. He changed the face of the Yankees franchise. I mean, the Yankees in 2023 were coming off of a season that they were 82-80. It was like their worst season since 1993. And you could tell there was tension. There was Brian Cashman was fiery, and he was, fighting openly with the media. It was actually kind of nice to see, the mighty Yankees go a little bit awry away from their usual buttoned up approach and their usual professional reaction. And to see them in the offseason of 2023 go and get Juan Soto by trading some critical players. Michael King is not an easy pitcher to walk away from. As you can see, he had a pretty successful year with the Padres, right? He was a great reliever turned starter. Looked like he had a lot of potential. But to see them try to really push for a 2024 endeavor was something so nice to see after a disappointing and frankly a really boring baseball season to watch as a fan. And you knew at some point that there was going to be this possibility. And so you took 2023 for what it was. It was seeing them change the face of the franchise and seeing them change I shouldn't say face of the franchise, is seeing them change their approach with a hitter that was so dynamic. To see a 1-2 punch like Aaron Judge to Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, and then backed up by a Giancarlo Stanton was a sight to see in the playoffs, right? It's a main reason why we got so far in the postseason. And so you can't sit here and say that it didn't hurt and sting to see a dynamic player like that leave. And on Sunday night, I was disappointed. I was shocked. I listened to the narrative being spun about how it was all about the money, and then you couldn't help but just kind of agree with what pundits and what talking heads and what the New York media was spinning, that it was all about it was all about the money. It was all about the money. He is a Boris client. There's not many examples. There are examples, but there's not many examples of clients not going with the top dollar figure, right? And yes, you can point to the Altuve. You can point to last year's train wreck of Scott Boris's core four there, not really signing until the last minute. But usually, 99% of the time, they'll go to the top dollar client. And it seemed like for a long time, it was going to be the Yankees. The Red Sox were kind of in contention for it a little bit. The Blue Jays seem to be year-to-year losers here when it comes to these big name free agents in Major League Baseball. But what ended up getting Juan Soto to the Mets was not the 16 years, $760 million that the Yankees offered, quite astoundingly. But it ended up being the 15 years, $765 million, which equates to about $51 million a year if you break it up, year by year. And he ended up choosing the Mets. And I had two thoughts initially. And you can see this initial reaction that I put up on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/PowellNotFound. One, good for him, right? If somebody's willing to pay you that much money to hit a ball, you run with it, right? That is the only choice. If someone's willing to pay you for your services that much money to hit a baseball and to make fans happy and to be the face of a franchise, you do it. One, two. My initial other thoughts was, the Yankees weren't that far behind. Would I have liked to see him stay in New York? Of course. I think that if you lose what is considerably number 3 in the MVP voting behind Judge and Ohtani, you're losing a really big chunk of your lineup. Soto, watching him every single day, I got more of an impression of the player that he is. Now, I reside in the Mid-Atlantic. I don't have access to Nats games unless I have cable. So I didn't get the opportunity to watch him every single day because of blackouts and because of those dumb things that are still in baseball right now. And hopefully maybe they won't be after the RSNs all go under. But I didn't watch him every single day. I knew that he was a presence, right? He was 19 years old when he brought a World Series to the Nationals, and he was a great hitter. But I didn't get the sense of how dynamic he was, that he was just an impossible out, right? Not only did he have power, but he had the contact of Altuve. The way he just approached each at-bat and each pitch with such confidence is something to see. And it's going to be great for every Mets fan that didn't watch a Yankees game. You're for 15 years, hopefully and ideally, you are going to watch one of the greatest hitters of all time, and something that basically the Mets have, for years have looked for that franchise player that they had in Piazza, right? That they had in Reyes, that they had in Wright to build around. Well, Alonso, right? Before this free agent market, and who knows if he's going to re-sign with the Mets. They've looked for that franchise player to build around and to build a team off of, right? Juan Soto is now your guy, and you're really going to enjoy seeing him play, right? My third reaction was, wow, that's a lot of money, right? That is a lot of money, and I'm kind of glad. And this is being said, and this is being reported, and blah, blah, blah. I'm glad as a Yankees fan that we didn't spend that much money. I mean, that's $250 million, right? The risk with putting $51 million a year on the table is and that's guaranteed, by the way, right? If you're not familiar with baseball does no salary cap. It's not like other sports, right? You don't get that money back if they get injured, as they do in the NHL. It's a guaranteed salary. Now, you never hope this for a player. You never hope. But if that $51 million gets hurt, the reaction is going to be insane, right? That's where you wonder, as a person who looks at the sport and sees these contracts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you start to wonder, when do the owners, the Steve Cohens, the George Steinbrenners Hal Steinbrenner's. I'm sorry, I'm living 20 years in the past. Hal Steinbrenner, right? When the learners, when is it too much risk to put in a player? I say that because last year, right, a couple years ago, before the Judge signing, they signed Cole, right? That was the big free agent of note, right? That was going to change the face of the franchise for the Yankees. And Cole was offered $36 million a year. This year, he was just up for an opt-out where he would get paid $38 million or $2 million more or whatever, make him the highest paid starting pitcher. And he opted out and then opted back in really quickly. It was a very weird transaction that still is yet to be rectified by the Yankees or explained by the Yankees. Last year, Judge missed 2 months of the season. Now, whatever, $36 million divided by 6, it was $6 million, right? So 2 months out of the season, that's $12 million that was sitting on the bench, right? When do you start to say that these contracts are so big that the risk is not worth it anymore? Because in 5 years, there's going to be another Juan Soto, right? There's going to be another version or incarnation of the best, the generational hitter. They keep on saying that Juan Soto is a generational talent. 2 years ago, Aaron Judge was a generational talent. A year ago, Shohei Ohtani was a generational talent. These generational talents seem to come around pretty often. I can't seem to understand why they keep on giving these people these monikers. They're just going to give it to another person 5 years from now, right? But my point is, when do the monetary value of these contracts become so big that when they get hurt, it becomes not worth it? When are you crippling your financial liability to pivot? These owners, these rich owners, right? People are waving off, I think, that conversation because they are assuming that Steve Cohen, with infinite funds, will just pay for everything no matter what. And in this case, yes, he might have, or he will, I guess, go into his own pocket to pay for this contract, right? He is showing that financial might that he has been teasing to an extent for 5 years, and only really showing it with the Verlander and the Max Scherzer deals, and they didn't turn out. And now he's showing it with Juan Soto. But at some point, there is an end to this money. And at what point do these owners say enough is enough, right? We're shelling out too much money to these players that we know there's an infinite resource of players coming up through the farm system. We can try to find a different alternative. All these owners are praised for their investments, right? But they seem to be shelling out gigantic amounts of money to players to hit a ball, right? It doesn't seem to make sense to me unless there's a piece of the financial puzzle that I just don't get. Like, when do they realize that there's a cheaper alternative waiting in the wings that they could pay 10 times less and have more money in their pocket? That's, to me, the conversation that I think is going to come up in 2026, because at some point, Steve Cohen can't pay for every single player on the Mets, right? I'm sure the same thing was said by George Steinbrenner. There was an old Onion article I mentioned a number of times on this podcast just because it tickles me so much, of when the Yankees were doing this kind of financial trickery in the 90s and 2000s. There was an Onion article that says the Yankees ensure the 27th pennant, this is before they won it, by buying every single player in baseball. We are approaching that territory with Steve Cohen. I just want to know, when is enough enough? And I think that's what's going to come up in these 2026 labor conversations, right? This contract, again, I just want to remind everybody, $765 million a year. And after 5 years of this 15-year contract, which will lead him to, I guess, 41 years old, right? 42, 41, 42. What is he, 26, 27? That if he opts out after a 5th year, the Mets can void the opt-out if they add $4 million a year to the contract and make it $55 million a year for the next 10 years, which brings it up to $805 million of potential value of the contract to hit a ball. I just want to remind everyone, $805 million to hit a ball. Now, in this world, and I'm being facetious, of course, this is monopoly money in baseball, but there are teachers, there are doctors, there are CEOs, there are people in your life that may be really rich, right? And the Mets are paying $805 million to Juan Soto to hit a ball. So I say to everybody who meets Juan Soto, who gets the opportunity to maybe potentially in the future sit down to dinner with Juan Soto and have a nice time, when the check comes and it's placed between you and Juan Soto better be getting that check, because there's probably not going to be a lot of people in this country that are going to have the financial might of Juan Soto. My goodness, $805 million potential value. That is crazy. It is, and you know what? It's been enlightening to see everybody talk about Steve Cohen and how this is going to affect baseball, and how they're praising Steve Cohen right now, much like they were praising Steve Cohen when they signed Verlander, when they signed Scherzer, and that's fine. They deserve their moment. I'm happy for the Mets, right? But let's be clear. When Steve Cohen talks about, the Mets are paying this contract, I take a little bit of issue with that, because Steve Cohen's not paying this contract. Steve Cohen is not paying $765 million. The Mets are not paying $765 million. They are not paying this contract. You know who's paying for this contract? Let me look right to the camera. You, the fan. The fans that go to Citi Field are the people that will be paying this $51 million a year. Think about it. The next time you go into Citi Field, the next time you stand in a line that's 20 minutes too long for your $25 hot dog and your $40 Coke, just think about it as you bite in to that cold Frankfurter. You're not really taking a bite out of that grade F meat. You're taking a bite out of Juan Soto's $805 million contract. That's what's happening. Fans that are paying for jerseys. Fans that are paying $60 to park. Fans that are trying to go to a baseball game desperately. Families that are 5 kids, 6 kids that are sitting in the cheapest seat possible because that's the only way they financially can make it. They're the ones that are paying for Juan Soto's contract. So let's not confuse the fact that the fans are paying these gigantic salaries. Each year, since the 90s, the average ticket for a baseball price has gone up, 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 up. And it rarely goes down, 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 down. So let's be clear. With that said, because it's not as light as you want it to be, let's take a quick break. We'll talk a little bit about what the Yankees will do now that Juan Soto is no longer a Met. And we'll come back and we'll do the rest of the show. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.